You're listening to Halftime with your host, Mylan Bittenbender, where each week we take a few minutes to step off the field of life and discuss the challenges and joys of navigating life in the middle years. I hope your time with us today will help you develop your strategy for a winning second half. Welcome to the locker room. You're among friends. Thank you for tuning in to the second half of my conversation with Robin Shear. Robin Shear is a joy coach, and she's written Messy Joy. And up to this point in the conversation, we're discussing her life leading up to her own midlife experience, but also her book. And we unpack some of that in the first part of this conversation. And at this point in the conversation, we're discussing the idea of the illusion of control being shattered at midlife and our response to that. What happens when we really begin to realize that we don't have control over a lot of the things that we think we have control of in this life. Robin's got some great insights, and our conversation is very engaging. So I hope that you will find some great nuggets of truth and insight here in the second half of my conversation with Robin Shear. So you also talked about, and I love this in your book, again, going back to the vulnerability, all of the help that you received. Is it EMDR? Yeah,
Yes.
EMDR therapy you received for some of your trauma. Obviously had to see a concussion specialist for the head injury. And the 25, you listed all of these different things you tried to do to solve the foot pain issue, and all of the help that you received. And I think that's a little bit of the whole concept of letting go of control too, rather than, nope, I've got this, I can fix this. Pursuing help. Talk to us a little bit about how that decision process and coming to those terms helped you and your journey toward joy.
Absolutely. It's funny because there may be somebody listening to this who can relate. So I didn't have any problem seeking professional help. I mean, I know who I am and who I'm not, right? I'm in this box, and then there's a much bigger box, and I needed that. So that was essential to me. However, having said that, I also struggled to seek help from people just like me. It was really hard for me to ask my friends for help, to ask my family for help. There was this disconnect between like who I could ask. And when you read the book, you'll see I recognized at some point that was a real pride problem. I could totally go to the professionals, but I really struggled to tell anybody that all of that was going on. And it was a really awful 4-year period of hiding and keeping it in and not telling my church, not telling, the world at large. And it cost me a lot. The weight that I carried of this secret, of all of this struggle, of feeling like asking for help would be a burden to people or bring up their own struggles and make them think about what was wrong in their life. There were so many reasons that I didn't ask. The people who love me the most didn't know that I was hurting, other than my family, of course, but my super tight, circle. So that was something that the Lord needed me to learn along the way, that yes, it's great to ask for professional help. And it did help me eventually. But I think the greater joy for me was really in acknowledging that help is a good thing, and that asking your loved ones to help you gives them an opportunity to love you in a tangible way. Because when people know that you're hurting and they want to do anything in their capacity to lighten your load, and you don't give them that option, you have to wonder what that does to the load that they carry. And I didn't recognize that in doing that, I was really stopping them from loving me the way that they needed to. It was good for them too. And so, there are so many examples in the book of times that I either didn't ask for help and it cost me, or I did and it brought joy to not just me, but that person as well. And I think joy is meant to be shared.
Yeah.
It is such a community uniter. It's such a contagious, beautiful thing. It's infectious. And when we don't allow people the opportunity to have joy by hogging it to ourselves, what is that?
Hmm.
That's not love. So
And maybe we even,
that's the answer.
yeah, well, maybe we even dilute the real power of joy when all they see on our Facebook feed is the highlights, when we're not
Right.
honest
Yeah.
about the challenges that we're going
Yep.
through. Because sometimes, people will just think, well, that person has it and I don't, and I probably can't.
And
Because
what's wrong with
because
me?
yeah, because their life is different, and this is my life. And
Yep.
yeah, wow. I am so
Mhm.
glad you went there. And that was one of the things in the book that really stood out to me. And I don't know if you saw the video I put on Facebook a couple weeks ago. The caption was, "I need help." Dot dot dot. There, now I said it.
No.
And
Okay.
it was
Wow.
a reference to your book, and what God spoke to me as I was reading your book, and
Wow.
that, man, I hate asking for help. And the first step of asking for help is letting people know you need help, which is a really, I don't know, especially for us guys, we got so much ego. Um,
You do.
and midlife is a
I
time,
agree.
yeah, where we gotta crucify that ego, or we're not gonna make
You're
it
right.
through. Um,
You're right.
but
Yes. And when we do, when we share that with the world, it encourages other people to
yeah,
consider how they're handling their own ego.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation that this whole joy thing is a big deal for me because that's
Mhm.
an area I struggle with. I read the scriptures and we see the fruit of the spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control. We see all of these qualities that should just be kind of born in us through the spirit that should come out of our lives. And joy is probably the
Mhm.
one that I struggle with the most. And it bothers me. I'm like, why do I struggle with being joyful? Some of that goes back to, and this is a huge part of kind of what I'm, discovering about myself. Did you say you are familiar with the Enneagram and how that whole thing works?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. So you've got a
Mhm.
little bit of experience with that. Found out I'm a one. I'm the perfectionist. Anger is just our thing, which is terrible when you think
Mhm.
about it. It doesn't mean that a one goes around angry all the time, but it means that
Mhm.
that's kind of their starting point for just about everything they
Mhm.
deal with is just a dissatisfaction, a frustration, a resentment about stuff in life.
Mhm.
And man, that sure does put that's a killjoy. It definitely puts a
It can
damper on joy. So as I was
yeah.
reading your book and even anticipating this conversation today, for me, a lot of it is I want to be a person who others would say his life is marked by true joy. Um,
Mm.
Take a minute
Mhm.
to coach me because
Mhm.
I need it. I mean,
Glad.
it's easy to become cynical in this world. And I think
Yes.
even those who aren't ones have become very cynical with all this stuff going on.
Yep.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Help me.
Sure. I'd be happy to and honored to. It would be almost impossible to not feel some cynicism given all that's coming at
Mhm.
us. And it carries a lot of weight. So if you're feeling it, it means you're breathing. A. But, going back to what you said, so the fruits of the Spirit, for those of us that, believe, we believe that the Spirit does bless us with all of these wonderful, life giving attributes. And yet we struggle. Where is my love?
Mm,
Where is my peace? There are days I don't feel either one of those. Joy is much the same. And, so there are a couple of ways to look at that. Number one, yes, when we remain close to the Lord, when we seek Him, when we just really invite Him into everything, we will feel more joy, more love, peace, and all of those things than we would have
mm.
had we not. I mean, it just comes with being in His presence. And then that like leaves this question. Wait a minute. I'm in the word all the time. I'm praying all the time. I am inviting God into life and
Yeah.
I'm still struggling. Again, that means that you're breathing, you're human because if you think about it, let's use love as an example. Are there times in life that you don't feel particularly loving? I can say that there are a lot of times I regret the decisions that I've made that didn't come from a place of love. They
Mm.
probably came from the opposite. What about the fruits of the Spirit? I thought I was supposed to have this overflowing love. But the thing is, it's there and we can cultivate it.
Mm.
We can make choices that help us to be more loving. We can go there, on a regular basis. We can dwell on what is keeping me from being loving. What do I need that will help me to have love in my heart to give to others? What
Mm.
am I lacking? What kind of work do I need to do? And joy is much the same. So I think as believers, sometimes we hear about the fruits of the Spirit. We don't always feel those things, and we think there's something wrong with us. When the fact is, God loves us so much, He gives them to us and He gives us ways to cultivate them. Like, what a cool God is
Yeah.
He?
Yeah.
And so we do, right? We just learn to cultivate them. And so, in terms of joy, it really has to start with this idea of knowing in your own definition, in your own world, what joy actually is.
Mm.
And when you feel it physically, and you will, where? How does it show up? Does your elbow start to tingle? Do your knees start knocking? Does your breathing change? Do you feel taller? Some people feel kind of tingly. They feel like, they're like lifted up on the shoulders. It's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah.
And so often we tune that stuff out, right? We're in our heads all the time. We're not in our bodies, and we miss those beautiful signals that God puts there to tell us this is a good thing and we want more of it. Do it again. So going back, it's like, what is joy and where do I feel it? And then what put it there? What are the things that make me feel like that? And in the book, you'll see, we talk about, the joy bucket
Yeah.
and this idea of knowing what brings us joy, imagining like we're putting that stuff in a bucket and making it happen so often that the stuff just naturally overflows to the world around us. And it's all based on, in the Psalms where it says, you anointeth my head with oil, my cup runneth over.
Mm.
My cup runneth over. We want our buckets to run over, and if you really think about the things that we have that bring joy to us, that make us feel whole, and that make us feel like the most authentic versions of ourselves. Those are the things that bring us joy. And if we really go there, a cup, come on, a cup would never be big enough. You have to have
A
a bucket. I
bucket.
have a friend who's like, my friend always says, like, you have so much like coming out, like you need a joy dumpster. And I think that may be true for some people, but yeah, my cup runneth over, of course, a
Yeah.
joy bucket. The goal is to fill that thing up with things that have meaning to you
Mm.
and then letting that overflow. And so often, as givers, as people who support others in life, we are so focused on them,
Yeah.
as we should be. But in terms of what brings meaning and joy to our own lives, we have stuffed it. We have made it wait.
Mm.
And maybe midlife is a great place to pause and turn that lens a little bit inward without guilt, because we're breathing and we should have it. We can't give it away if you don't have it.
Yeah.
Turn the focus back in and ask yourselves those questions, and just let that come out of you. It might be a great time of discovery.
Wow. I love that word cultivate. That is a powerful word.
Too.
It's a word that I don't think we really understand deeply enough for the most part,
Mhm.
and don't carry out in our lives. But, I mean, you think Paul called it the fruit of the Spirit. I know a lot of farmers, and those who have a lot of fruit, um, they're masters of cultivation. They know how to cultivate the
Mhm.
blueberries, or whatever their product is. And in the same
Mhm.
way, we have a tendency to go through life, and there's certain things that we'd like to have more of, and we just expect
Mhm.
it to just kind of grow on our branches. But there
Mhm.
are ways to cultivate those things.
Mhm.
And what you
Mhm.
shared just a few minutes ago was brilliant. I mean, you demonstrated your gift in helping people understand how to cultivate joy and actually, create the circumstances or the ways to cultivate and increase your joy so that you have a bucket full rather than
Mhm.
just a little bit. Are there any other like for example, when you're coaching people, are there any other principles that just seem to not stick often? Are there any principles that you think we struggle with, maybe because of cultural or societal things? Are there other
Mhm.
cultivating practices that you're like, man, this is one that I believe in and I see its power, but it's hard for people to get?
Yeah, the one that comes up for me is standing up to the voice that stops us
Mm,
from wanting to cultivate this stuff in the first place. And for most of us that are givers, that voice is the voice of guilt.
mhm,
Because if we've been raised to focus on others and to meet the needs of others, and we find joy in doing that, so often, when we want to focus on our own needs, we feel like there's a hurting world out there and we need to solve their problems before we can have any of that attention. They're important. They're so important. So often we put ourselves so far down the list if we make the page at all.
yeah,
And I don't think that's how God designed us. If the Lord created us intentionally and, we're awesomely made and, He formed us, before, He knew who we were before we were ever even born. I mean, we were so intentionally designed to know Him and to love Him and to be loved by Him. And we don't even let ourselves feel good sometimes. We feel like only other people get to have that. I'm not so sure that that's a message that God is putting there. Guilt. If I could just
yeah,
grab it and throw it in the toilet, I would, because so often it rears its ugly head when it doesn't belong. It can be appropriate. So let's say you're driving 95 and you see the light is about to change and it's red before you get there, and you just plow through that thing with everything you got because you got that Ferrari in midlife and you're going to use it, and you should feel guilty,
yeah,
right? You did something wrong. That's the purpose of guilt. It's the
yeah,
emotion that flares up when you do something wrong. Yay, good job, guilt, you go. But if you are hearing us talk and you're thinking, man, I haven't felt joy since
mm,
1975. And when I want to pour back into myself, I hear these messages like, nope, the world needs you. And you can when you accomplish all of these 50 things
mm,
on your list. And maybe someday, you'll have time for yourself. That is guilt that is inappropriate
yeah.
because you're not doing anything wrong. If the Lord created you so intentionally to love Him and to be loved by Him, I think He wants you to have joy, because if it's a fruit of the Spirit, I think there's purpose in it. And when we're blocking it from happening in our own lives because we're listening to guilt, that's not coming from the one that made you. We've got to stand up to that voice.
Yeah, and I think guilt, not handled correctly in a godly way, turns into shame. Um,
It
and
can.
that's not a shameful statement,
Yes.
like shame on you for allowing it to become shame. I think it's about
Yeah.
faith when we, believe Romans 8:1 that says there is now therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ. Well, we all know we're guilty. We're all guilty, but there's no
Of course.
condemnation. And so
Amen.
it depends on how we process that guilt, whether we use that
Mhm.
guilt to say, this creates an opportunity for me to make a situation right, uh, to be
Mhm.
humble, to repent, to confess, and to make it
Mhm.
right, or we allow that guilt to
Yep.
continue to work on us and become shame.
Mm.
We live in such a shame oriented and anxious
Mhm.
culture. And I
We
don't see
sure
a lot
do.
of joy. I don't see any joy in politics. Boy, it's a
Uh,
nasty mess, right? I don't see any joy
yeah.
in the nightly news. Very few
Nope.
stories of positive things. Most of it is gloom and doom and despair. Um,
Yep.
so speak to us about joy in our culture. How can we reclaim that? Is that a one at a time, those of us who have it, feeding it back in? Or do you think there's a way for us to reach our culture with the hope or the joy that comes
Mhm.
from hope? What are your thoughts about what we can do about this anxious and negative world that we live in?
I love that question. And I named my business Joy to the World Coaching on purpose. I really believe that this is something that can spread globally, but
Mm,
I don't think that it's going to be possible for one girl in a small town to do it alone. It has to be something that, we do collectively, we do individually, but we have to embrace that this matters. We have to
yeah,
know that this has value and go after it without the guilt and then share with the world what we received as a result
yeah.
and encourage other people to do that as well. It's not like we're bragging like, oh my gosh, my life is so great, I have all this joy, as much as, I was outside and I could see that the dew was on the grass and the sun was coming out just right. And it looked like millions of lit up fiber optics at the tip of each blade of grass. Like, there's joy in that. That's
Yeah.
not bragging. That's saying, I recognize there is goodness and I want to be so in touch with it
Mm,
that I share it and that it makes other people want to do that same thing. And so we are an anxious society. There is negativity coming at us from every single direction. But have you noticed that those news stories that get shared on social media, that get, emailed out to people, the ones that get to be the viral stories
mhm.
are the positive ones.
Yeah.
The stories about the little boy with the lemonade stand for his mom's chemo, or, you could go on about the things that fill us up. We are hungry for that
Yeah.
stuff. The media might not recognize it. We know if it bleeds, it leads. But we also know that, when there's goodness in it, that's the stuff we want to hear about.
Yeah.
Do you remember back in the pandemic when, I can't even think of his name, the guy from The Office had some good news? Did you watch that on YouTube?
No, I don't think I saw that.
Okay. You're going to have to add his name into this because it escapes me right now, but he's, oh gosh, he's so huge and I can't think of his name. But anyway, John Krasinski, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyway, yeah, yeah. So he had this whole little YouTube channel during the pandemic where he would sit at a news desk and his kids would make these hand drawn like some good news signs behind, and he was like, in his boxer shorts below the Zoom lens, and he would just share all these stories of real life hope. People would send in videos of all the good that was taking place. And these things went crazy viral. People were so hungry for good news then. And I
Wow.
feel like nothing has changed. We're still just as hungry for joy. But when, the pandemic ended, we sort of shifted back into productivity mode, get it done. And
Yeah.
we left behind this thing that we recognized at that time. There's meaning in
Yeah.
this. And it has meaning now. We just need to actively recognize that and do something about it. So yeah, when you have good news, share it. When something blesses you, share it.
Yeah.
When you feel like you've learned something of value, share it. There's goodness, there's joy in all of that. And I actually have a Facebook group where we literally just get together and share what brings us joy, because we know that it's going to be contagious and then it'll just keep going from there. And then, this joy to the world thing might actually happen if enough of us get on board and share the joy that we have.
You never know. Well,
You never
if
know.
you would try to find that YouTube channel or whatever it was, and send that to me, I'd like to
I
put
will.
that in the show notes.
Okay.
We talk about it
Okay.
here. Maybe that's something that we can share with the people. Now,
Absolutely.
you actually open your book, so I want to unpack something just a little bit here, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. But um, you share something in the beginning of the book about a comment that was made to you. I think you said at church, a woman came up and said something about your life
Yeah.
being perfect, and it's good to see that that's possible. So you talk about sharing all of this joy, and sometimes I think we do struggle with the whole how do we do this in the right kind of way without making the wrong impression? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Can you unpack that
Mhm.
story and kind of what you learned from that?
Sure. Yeah, this is legitimately how the book opens. And you should know, when God gave me the idea to write this book, I did not want to do it for all the reasons stated earlier. And it was hard to be vulnerable when I had been hiding all this stuff. And one day our power went out, and I had all these Zoom calls lined up, and all of a sudden none of that was possible. So I went outside and I had my phone and my dog, and all of a sudden that story that you're referencing came to mind. And I turned on my little audio recorder and just spoke that story out
Mm,
into existence. And that became chapter one of the book that I didn't want to write. And I was in church, and a friend of mine came right up after church one day, and she was like, I just want you to know I really love your posts on social media. And I was like, wow, thank you. Not knowing that she was about to say, well, they show me that life can be perfect, and I want to have a perfect life too. Oh my gosh. And I about fell down, and I couldn't breathe or think. My heart stopped, and I thought, what have I done?
mm, wow.
Because I never intended to convince anybody that that was the goal or that it was at all possible. You know,
Yeah.
my mission in sharing goodness was just to share goodness. And by only sharing what was positive, I gave such a horrible impression about, a false reality. And so, yeah, I did have to learn to start sharing a little bit at a time. And part of my hesitation, and I think we all know this person, but you go to the grocery store and you run into a friend you haven't seen in a while, and you're like, hey, how are you? And they give you the 20-minute drama of all the stuff that's wrong in their life. And pretty soon you know about their hemorrhoids and all this stuff. And you're like, oh my God, I do not want to know. So I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to know that stuff. It was always, wow, I'm great. How are you? And so, yeah, having that conversation changed my view of sharing some of the difficulty, and it gave me opportunity to share that work could be done.
Yeah.
Maybe I needed to focus on something, maybe there was an area for growth. And I know that there's goodness in learning that kind of stuff from others. All these things that have been meaningful to me, I've learned from people like you and other people who have shared that with me. So if I'm in a position to share, I should be sharing something that's helpful and not just something that sets people up for disappointment.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's
Mhm.
even a way to share our challenges and difficulties and the reality of the humanity of being a human being in this
Mhm.
broken world, that can still be very life giving. And I think
Mhm.
pausing long enough to not just spill the positive spin on something, but literally think of
Mhm.
the life giving aspect of even enduring the challenges that
Mhm.
come with living in this broken, messed up world.
Mhm.
So, well, tell me a little bit about. We've talked quite a bit about your book. Tell us about writing the book, just real briefly. What was that experience like, and
Yeah.
even what it taught you about life and about yourself.
I wrote the book completely out of order. I always thought you had to, have a real chronological path.
Hmm.
And if you read it, my brain doesn't work that way. But once I started just dumping out whatever it was that God put into my heart to start typing, I could see that, He was taking it in a direction that I never intended or would have gone. There are chapters I don't even remember writing.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that I did, but there are some specifically that my fingers were just flying. And later, a couple days later, I would read it and think, wow, that was not, those aren't my
Hmm.
words. And so it was a heck of a process. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And because there is, so much trauma in the book, there is stuff that I needed to heal from. And I was in therapy throughout the entire process of writing that book. I'm still in therapy now, and I probably will be until the day I die. I think that we need people in life that can help us heal like therapists,
Yeah.
and people who can help us move forward like coaches. I just think we need that. There's goodness. So Therapy was a huge part of it. But yeah, I learned a lot about myself, my views of things, how my views of a situation are very different from somebody else's view. And there's goodness in recognizing that. There was just a lot of healing that took place, and I still didn't really intend to share it.
Yeah.
I knew that God wanted me to write this, and I wrote it. But I really wasn't sure if it was ever going to leave my computer, because it was scary. It's to be so vulnerable and to just throw stuff out there, not knowing who's going to read it, how it might land, what they might think. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And God made it really clear, like somebody needs something
Yeah.
in this book. Like he's at work. If he gave me all that stuff, yes, it helped me to heal, but there has to be more to it. And so yeah, putting it out it's just been really beautiful,
Yeah.
to hear from readers that I know or don't know about one little sentence that struck them. It's just been like, wow, I never would have thought that one would have meaning.
Mm.
And if he can use a broken crackpot like me with the ADD brain that's in that book, he can use anybody. And it's been beautiful to see how he's done that.
That's awesome. Any of the discouragements
Yeah.
that the enemy threw at you during that time, have any of them come true? Or because that's the thing, a lot of times
So
we worry about, well, what if I say this and what if I do that? And then
oh,
later on, we find that that
yeah,
very thing that freaked us out and scared us to death didn't happen, or God twisted it and
yeah,
made it great. So,
yes. There's a lot of that. And I think whether you write a book or not, if you have a message that you feel, you're given to share, and then there's resistance to sharing that, we need to question where that resistance might be coming from,
mm,
If you know that your message can be helpful and life-giving,
yeah.
and you feel some resistance, it probably means you're on the right track
Sure,
and that you should share it.
sure.
Somebody needs it. Yeah, I had a
I
ton.
I loved,
I had
I
some.
loved all the scripture that you put in the book. Again, a lot of it was just kind of placed in there. I thought later, I haven't done it yet, but that might be the kind of thing I may even just go back through and highlight all of those. And they can be just little
Good.
things that, when I'm struggling, when I'm having a rough day or whatever, I can just go back, open the book, and look for a highlighted scripture
Please.
about joy, and it can almost be,
Yes.
just a short devotional prompt,
Mhm.
kind of a thing. So,
Well, since you brought that up, I hope that you also go back, if you haven't already, and answer some of the discussion questions, the
oh yeah,
self-application questions. There are over 200 questions that if you just pick one and just let that kind of ruminate in your mind each day and think about why you believe the way you believe and what comes up for you and where that might come from, you will learn a lot
yeah,
about yourself. And that could be the thing that will help you to have joy despite your anxieties and your Enneagram and all the stuff in the world. That can be the thing that helps you mix joy into your mess. But you got to
yeah.
take the time to do it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That was a great feature of the book. I mean, just lots of really good questions, thought prompting questions, and things to
Thank you.
really process. So you
I
also
was told that. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was told that should have been separated and sold in a separate journal, and I just wanted to get it into people's hands. It wasn't about making money. It was about helping that person somewhere that felt alone, like nobody gets it,
Yeah,
and finally is like, "Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this."
yeah.
So
Good for
very
you.
nice.
It is a wonderful free resource that does feel like it could have been, a study guide or something separate from the book, but you included it there. Very, very good stuff. And
Thanks.
you also did a TED Talk, and wow, that's another really cool thing. I would like to do some keynote speaking and some things like that. So I'm curious to know, how did you get hooked up with a TED Talk? What's the process for that like? Most of us don't know how those people get there.
Yeah, I mean, there are applications in most cities around the country,
Okay.
so there are lots of opportunities to try and get on the TED stage. And I was fortunate enough to be chosen in the Detroit market, which it's a big market, and it
Yeah.
provides a lot of opportunity for your message to be heard. And I was just very grateful, especially at this point in my speaking journey. I mean, I'm still in my infancy, and getting to have that opportunity was absolutely a God thing. And we might need another episode for you to hear the whole story. It was really an incredible, I can't even believe God allowed it.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. It was him. And so I thought, gosh, if he is going to provide this crazy, unexpected opportunity, I'm going in, because
Wow.
this could be my only chance to have that. And he gave me a story to share that was out of the book. I have never shared that story publicly, just by speaking. The only other time I shared it was at my church. I held a conference, the Messy Joy Conference, and I had to read it out loud out of the book with tears and Kleenex and the whole thing. And so to stand on that red dot and tell millions of people, hey, this thing happened, and here's
Yeah.
how I found joy, and you can too, it was him.
Yeah.
It was him all the way. What an opportunity.
Well, praise God. We're going to put a link to where people can find your book and the TED
Please.
Talk in the show notes, so
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
people can find that. I like to ask guests at the end of the conversation, is there anything I didn't ask that I should have asked, or that anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get to today?
Gosh, you're so good at what you do already. I cannot think of anything. I think that we went all over the place
Yeah,
as we could with a
yeah,
subject like this and a friendship like ours. And I'm just grateful that you brought me on. I hope that somebody somewhere takes away something
yeah,
that's helpful. Bottom line.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, what a rich conversation. Really enjoy your time, the time that we've been able to spend together unpacking this stuff. Very insightful. And I really do encourage everybody to go out and grab the book, look up your Facebook page, and we're going to have some other resources that I've already mentioned in the show notes and things like that. But Robin, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you'll be able to join us. I'm going to let you know when this podcast airs. And if you would join us on in our Facebook group,
I already
during the
joined.
oh, good. Awesome. Good. Well, thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
We'd love to see you kind of show up in the group that week, and maybe somebody would like to reach out to you that way and
I'd love it.
and continue the conversation. All right. Well, God bless. Thank
Thank
you so much again for your vulnerability, for your insights, for your wisdom. And I'm sure there's probably another episode in the future down the road somewhere.
May God be with you also. Thank you. And I'm glad you had me on, even though I've never played a sport in my life.
All right. God bless. God bless, Robin. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.